For this project, I wanted to make something unique. So I came up with the idea to make a procedurally generated cutscene. Let me show you how it was made. I was working on my mobile platformer game called Little Catman, and I wanted to add in an opening cutscene. Then the idea jumped to my mind that this would be a perfect spot to include some procedural generation. At this point, I've already made a Twitter bot which tweeted out a variation for a day at the League of Legends Worlds event, so I can use a similar implementation and get some pretty neat results. Before writing my code, however, I had to make some visuals, so I hopped into Paint 3D, whipped out the crayon tool, and got to work. My idea for this cutscene is to make it so my main character, Little Catman Man, would be telling you about his arch enemy, Dr. Dogford IV, and how he was mean to him. Thus, he needs to exact his revenge. By making this cutscene art out of crayon, it would be like he's telling you the story himself, which I thought added a little bit of flair to it. After making my lovely art pieces, I created a timeline in Unity. Now, this acts pretty similar to a timeline in any editing software you were to use, and where it's able to allow certain events to queue in at specific times. For my application, this would make it so I have my events fading in and out. This is done by making first a bunch of sprites with the parchment paper background, and then having some drawings that I made out of the crayon tool that I was talking about earlier being the child of those game objects. I also made several Text Mesh Pro objects, which are just my text written out. And if the text would be changed eventually by the code, however, it doesn't need to be implemented, so it can just be a blank Text Mesh Pro object. After all of those were made, I put them into my timeline and organized them by when they would be appearing. Now here's the point that you've all been waiting for. We can start looking at the code. I knew that I could set up the sentence structure, that it could have some varied phrases, including where he was at the time, what he was doing, and what the dreaded deed that the evil Dr. Dogford IV did to him. In my script, I have it taking in 3 Text Mesh Pro text values, that being the setting, the activity, and the problem. Then I made some arrays of being some settings, some generic activities, some bed activities, and some computer activities, as well as some of the problems for our protagonist. Then in the start function, which is a function that runs at the very first frame when a scene is loaded in Unity, I set the setting text to a random value in the setting array. I then checked if the setting chosen before was the last value of the array, which is something that I hard-coded to be the computer outcome, or being at his keyboard. It then will select a computer activity if that is the case. Then I am checking if that is not the case, if it is instead selected the bed outcome, which I also hard-coded to be the first value in the array, and if so, then it will select one of the bed activities. Finally, if it is neither, then just choose a generic activity. After that, we set the problem text to the random value in the problem array. Awesome, we're all set with our script, and now we're going back to our timeline. But before changing anything, we also need to make an empty game object, which I call text manager, and slap in the script that we just made. And also, along with that, we're going to assign our Text Mesh Pro objects to the corresponding ones for setting, activity, and problem. Now, for my timeline, I read out each of the longest possible phrases in each array and I timed it. This would give me a good estimate for how long I want that text to be on the screen for. I made the text and visuals to fade in and out by changing the alpha value, or essentially just changing the opacity for those objects. It was a pretty lengthy process, but once it was all done, it was looking pretty good, but I had to find some audio. So I found some great background audio that is some like adventurous medieval music. I chose this specifically for this scene because it was inspired originally by the cutscene that first is when you open The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. And once it's all put together, it looks a bit like this. With the current setup, it has a pretty consistent success rate, and with I calculated to be around 510 different results. However, I want to find or generate a CSV of cat behaviors so then we can bring that number to possibly over 1,000. Along with this, I want to add future implementations where maybe I make either more images or even potentially procedurally generated images to correspond to what he's doing at the time. But until then, I think it looks pretty good, so let me know what you think and have a great day.